Hello everybody, Sasha here for Orchestral Tools. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to the Berlin Brass main collection. In this video I want to talk about all the important features and concepts of the library, and we will take a listen to a lot of MIDI mockups I have done, and I basically want to show you around this very huge collection of brass instruments and samples. You can already see here when I click through the different instruments, we have quite a lot of articulations, and they are also very consistently recorded amongst the different sections and solo instruments we have. There will be more videos covering all the instruments in detail, so in this video I like to paint the big picture to give you an overview of all the possibilities that come with this collection. Okay, before we start, I would like to clarify something to avoid any possible misunderstandings. In 2014, Orchestral Tools released a library called Berlin Brass Expansion C Horn Effects. This collection also has 4 individual horns recorded as well as a section of 4 players. And besides all its effects articulation, it also has some standard sustains and staccatos. However, the sample content of that library has nothing to do with the Berlin Brass main collection. The recordings are 3 years apart from each other. They are not even the same players. However, this library will work very well together with Berlin Brass. The same, by the way, applies to the brass which you can find in Metropolis Arc 1. They are all recorded at Teldix with the same signal chain, so they will blend very nicely together. So now let's get started with the lineup of the Berlin Brass main collection. We have a separately recorded first horn, second horn, the third, and the fourth. And then, separate from the solo sessions, we have recorded the same players in the same positions as a section playing in unison. Okay, when we go over to the right, we got the first trumpet, the second, and the third. And also an ensemble. The same goes for the trombones. We have a tenor trombone 1, 2, and a bass trombone. And then we have those 3 trombones together. And of course the tuba. So this is the full lineup of the Berlin Brass main collection. It's a pretty standard setup for an orchestra, and we really try to focus on this bread and butter set of instruments. Like for all the main collections of the Berlin series, there will be expansions covering more exotic instruments and also mutes. We don't have mutes in the main collection because we wanted to do them properly with a full set of articulations, and so in the near future we will have a whole collection dedicated to brass mutes. Okay, so why did we do this whole thing with 4 different horns, 3 different trumpets, 3 trombones and such? There are actually many advantages for that. First and foremost, you have 4 different horns, for example, so 4 different colors for a solo passage, or you can do a true 4-voiced instrumentation like I have here. Okay, we can compare this to the same passage played by only 1 horn, the third in this case. That also didn't sound too bad, but I think you can hear that this phrase done with all 4 horns creates much more depth, much more richness in sound, and you can also recognize the 4 individual voices very clearly if they are played by 4 different players. In the past, you probably also tried to do something like this with a horn ensemble patch. So that's what I did here. This is basically the same, but played with the ensemble instead of the single instruments. That didn't sound bad per se, but it's much too big, too muddy, and too undefined in comparison with the 4 individual horns. By the way, just to give you a little impression of the dynamic range of Berlin Brass, our horns can also play this whole thing very, very quietly. But if you want, you can get pretty loud and nasty at the same time, especially with the low brass, with the trombones and the tuba. Another advantage of this concept of individual players is that you can basically build your own sections. For example, you actually don't need a section with 2 players or with 3 players. You can just use the 2 or 3 individual horns and play a unison line. Or in this case, I have 2 horns playing the top line and 2 horns playing the octave below. Or you can just pick all the notes and move them up and have basically 4 horns in unison. Of course, you could also do this with the ensemble patch, but with this approach you can also start in unison and then split up the voices to do something like this. The same idea, of course, can also be applied to a lyrical trumpet phrase. In this example, I've set the top line to vibrato samples and at the same time the 2 other voices to non-vibrato. Let's listen to this little example played by just 1 trumpet. This is the first trumpet in all 3 voices. I think you can hear the same effect as in the example before. It sounds good, but it loses some width and some depth and some kind of expression and clarity. This is again all 3 trumpets. Okay, another very important feature of Berlin Brass is the ability to control the attack of sustained notes. Orchestral tools did this the first time with Berlin strings, where you got soft attack, immediate attack, and hard attack or extended attack sustains. In Berlin Brass we've done something similar, although brass instruments, especially trumpets, cannot have the same softness in an attack. So the softest trumpet attack, for example, is something like this. And then on the immediate sustain you already get a little tiny accent. And those are also, like in Berlin strings, really different recordings of sustained notes. I have some chords here for the trumpets, trombones and tuba to illustrate those sustains, also in different dynamic layers. So the first one is soft attack, second one immediate, and the same in forte later. And then we also have really accented attack sustains. Another very big feature introduced with Berlin strings is the adaptive legato. And of course we also get this in Berlin brass. For the trumpets, the tuba and the horns, we've actually recorded 3 different types of legato. We have the standard slurred legato, which you are very familiar with, I guess. We have fast runs legato, which is not only recorded with semitones and whole tones, but up and down to the major fourth. And we have a retoned legato, which I will talk about in a second. The adaptive legato allows our virtual instrument to tweak and morph the legato settings according to your playing speed. So you can start off with some slow notes and get the slurred legato, and if you then play something like this very fast run here, it will automatically morph into the fast runs transitions, and you get a very believable phrased result. This is the trumpet ensemble, by the way, so now it's getting a little bit louder. Okay, here I have a phrase for the first horn. I will just play it for you as it is. If you are familiar with how brass players typically phrase their melodies, you might have recognized that this is usually not the way a horn player would play a phrase like this. There are slurs between every note, and it's just an undefined slurring through the whole melody. So to be able to avoid things like that, we recorded the retoned legato. Retoned legato are basically the same intervals as with the slurred legato, and they are played as intervals, but there is a retoned attack on every transition. So if I just set all notes to retoned legato, we would get a result like this. Certainly better than just with the slurs, but we can improve it even more by assigning slurred legato to certain notes and retoned legato to certain other notes. So every time we have this high value here in this controller, we get the retoned legato on the next transition, and if it's down, we have the slurred legato. Okay, and now we can even improve it more by introducing maybe some more gaps between the notes. So maybe, for example, here we can have a little gap, and maybe also here. Actually, I liked it better this way. Okay, so this obviously comes down to taste, and especially to the phrasing you want. So the important thing to notice here is that Berlin brass gives you the freedom to decide which kind of phrasing you want, which kind of legato, and especially with brass, I think we should be very careful, especially with slurred legato. Brass players tend to be very economical with this whole slurred legato thing. So in many cases, slurring might not be a good taste of phrasing a brass line. Okay, now I have a little phrase for the horn ensemble. This basically consists of different short articulations, so staccatissimo, long marcato, short marcato, and also staccato. I think those short articulations are very, very important for a brass library. We actually recorded those for every instrument. You simply need all those different short notes to be able to really phrase a brass line like this properly. This can't be done convincingly simply with staccato and sustains. And it's not only important to have all those articulations, it's also important that they match together. So they should have the same attack and the dynamics should match so that you are really able to combine them in a way like this and it feels like a realistic performed phrase. By the way, this is the horn ensemble, as I said. You could also do that with our 4 solo horns, and this time I simply copied the MIDI and not played them in separately, which I would recommend though. And if you want an even bigger sound, you can also combine those 4 horns, or maybe less, with the 4 horn ensemble. With Berlin Brass, we also have a new feature in Capsule, which you can see here. Now you are basically able to adjust the range of the patches. As you can see, our natural recorded range, for example, here for the horn, is really high. So we start down at the low pedal F on the horn, which is a B flat in concert pitch. And up to the D4. This is really nice range, but maybe you want to extend it a little bit. You maybe want to go even lower with some notes. And to do this, you can simply grab this slider and pull it down. The horn could play even lower. For example, I remember reading this low C or G in concert pitch in a score one time. And of course you can also narrow this range. Maybe you want to build your own multis in Kontakt where you want to adjust the range of every instrument, so you can do this as well. Okay, let's talk about the microphone positions. Actually, up to this point in the video, everything you heard was just the main Decca tree microphone position we have in every library. I've prepared this short example to show you all the different microphone positions Berlin Brass has to offer. So beside that, we also have the AB as in every other library. And of course the surround. Okay, now I would like to show you the close mic positions we have. In Berlin Brass we decided to use a stereo pair of microphones for every section. So it's not every single instrument that has its own microphone, it's a stereo pair for a section, and it's pan hard left and right. So if you just listen to the close microphones of the horn ensemble, you have the first horn on the very right, the fourth horn on the very left, and the other 2 in between. And the same applies for the trumpets and the trombones. Only the tuba has mono spots. And we also get actually 2 spot microphone positions for every instrument. So for the horns we have a stereo pair in front of them, and the second spot is a stereo pair behind the horns facing the bells. For trumpets, trombones and tuba, on the other hand, we simply have 2 different colors of spot microphones. And then we also recorded an ORTF setup for every section individually. So this is also a stereo microphone configuration, a little bit farther away from the instruments compared to the spot microphones. And it's also centered to every section. So if you don't pan it, if you just listen to it, every section fills up the whole stereo space. We did this to give you a little bit of freedom for panning and specialization. Of course, with the tree, AB, and surround microphones, the stage is set as it is, as we recorded the players on their respective positions. But if you just want to use the spot audio or TF mics, you basically have the freedom of placing them in your mix as you wish. So let's just take a listen to all of the closer microphone positions. I've panned them a little bit inside Capsule to recreate the stereo field impression of the room microphones. Okay, that was the first spot for every instrument. Now the second one. And now the ORTF. And again, just for comparison, the standard Decca tree. I think with this amount of instruments and all the microphone positions you just heard, and the articulations, the dynamic range, and also the tonal range and timbre range of the instruments, Berlin Brass can definitely be your main orchestral brass workhorse. I think it was 4 years ago when Orchestral Tours released Berlin Woodwinds, the first installment of the whole series. It is still, I think, a benchmark for orchestral woodwinds, and it's far from being outdated. It was and will be continuously updated and improved over the years. The same applies to Berlin Strings and also Berlin Percussion, and will apply to Berlin Brass. Those libraries are designed to work on the long run. They want to be tools for you to be used for many, many years. This is also why Orchestral Tours decided to do the main libraries with all the bread and butter essential content, and then expanding every section with additional libraries which cover more unique and extended content of orchestral sounds. As I said, for Berlin Brass, we will have a whole expansion dedicated to mutes. We will have expansions for additional instruments, for example, piccolo trumpet or contrabass trombone and stuff like this. So there's much more to come. For today, let me wrap it up here with a last little tidbit. I have for you here the brass parts of the little teaser music I've done, so you can listen to just the brass and also without any processing or external reverb. By the way, if you allow me that last comment, the samples of Berlin Brass, just like every other library we have done, are totally unprocessed. There's no EQ on them, there's no compression, no tape saturation or whatever. It's just the player, the instrument, the room, and the microphones. The rest of the signal chain is totally neutral and doesn't color the sound. And also the editing and post-production is done very carefully to not change the color of the samples. So the user basically gets a raw and natural sound that he or she can color themselves as they wish. So this is really another aspect of freedom and choice that Orchestral Tours wants to give the user. We don't want to offer just one color, one cinema or radio ready sound. We want to offer you the possibilities to make your own sound and process them any way you like. And with raw and natural samples, you really have much more possibilities to shape and process them as if you use processed material in the first place. Okay, so now, as I said, the little teaser fanfare, just with the brass instruments, we have marcatos in here, staccatos, repetitions, runs, some glissandos from the trombones, crescendos. Yeah, it's basically a mix of everything. Enjoy it, and goodbye. See you next time.